Beautiful day, great crowd.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
By the way, I spoke to Ed and we had a nice conversation, and I told him the most surprising thing about me is that he probably has not met a 5'11" Jewish girl who can go to her left, and he then just dared me to do that. So I had him sit on the left just for the heck of it. And he played soccer, and I played soccer. So we've just built instant rapport. It's fabulous. Wait till you see it play out. All right, Ed, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how you talk about your soccer career and how that led to Amex.
That's a great question. I grew up in Brooklyn, not too far from here, and it is a borough of immigrants. I started playing soccer at an early age. Went to school in Brooklyn. When I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. None of my friends were going to college, so I took off a year, worked in Manhattan, realized I better go back to college. And I negotiated a deal with the University of Tampa that if I could make their soccer team, they would pay my room and board. Went down, and I found University of Tampa in a book, and it looked good because it was near a beach.
Right.
And there was no beaches near where I grew up in Brooklyn that you'd want to go to at that time. Now forget about it. Brooklyn is great. But went down there, made the team. First game of the year, blew out my knee, never played another game. So I finished a semester in Tampa, came back. I had to work through college, ended up going to NYU, and when I was a junior in NYU, there was a posting in the cafeteria about a 2-week temporary position at American Express. Took that job, and I tried to parlay that into a year, and it worked.
Yeah, because 33 years later, here you are, right? That's not a bad story.
Yeah.
So what was a little bit of your career path? And you know, you started there, you're a lifer, obviously. So what are the different things that you've done?
A lifer.
Yeah, well, have you your entire work life you've spent in one company? That's pretty amazing.
I know.
Half of these people have worked in 12 places in 3 years.
Yeah.
Because they don't have any stock options.
No, but I never imagined working at American Express for so long, for 30-something years. And when I look back now, when I hear it, it's still jarring to say I've been there for so long, because I feel like I've had 10, 12, 15 different careers. I've worked almost in every business of American Express. I started in finance, started as a temp, and literally had worked up the company in different positions. I've done things I never thought I would do. I've been places I never thought I would be. I lived in Chicago with the company, in Arizona, 6 years in London, traveled the world, and it's been a great ride. It still feels fresh. You know, I think American Express is a 163-year-old company that has to continually reinvent itself to succeed, to stay relevant. And I feel people who work in Amex have to continually reinvent themselves to stay relevant and stay fresh. And I don't feel like I've been there 30-something years. I feel like it's still brand new and it's still exciting.
That's amazing. So, you know, you look at this huge company, it's old, huge, storied company, and there are all these different businesses that you're in, right? And so you're always included as a financial services company, but so what kind of business is American Express? Is it lifestyle, because everyone loves their platinum card? Is it the card business itself? Is it small business? Is it financial advice? What is it?
It's literally all of that. We're a payments company at our heart. We're an issuer, an acquirer, and a network, but we own our own ecosystem. So when I go to California and we're meeting with the tech community, I'd say think of American Express like you would think of Apple, right? Apple owns the hardware, the software. They care deeply about the customer experience. They don't sell as many phones as Android, but they have complete control of their ecosystem. That's American Express. Visa, MasterCard are like Android. They have a lot of volume, but they don't control their ecosystem. There's some huge benefits to their model, but we care deeply about adding value to card members and to merchants who accept the card and to the partners we work with. And because we can control our ecosystem, we can create a lot of value. But at our core, I'd say we're a service company, and we still believe that it's a noble profession to serve people and to help people be more successful in life. And most, if not all, of our businesses are really about service.
So, okay, but you have these different business units, and do you as an organization have a brand, an umbrella brand, or is it run as if each business unit has its own brand? How is it operationally done, and how is it done philosophically when it comes to branding?
Philosophically, the brand is American Express. And one of the key elements of our business model is to always add value to the brand, to live up to the brand, because it's a very valuable asset. Open, and I know Scott Rowan spoke today about Open Forum, is really the only business that has branded itself differently, but it's still owned by American Express. And we've tried branding over the years, of trying different brands. Like we have a prepaid e-commerce platform called Serve. And when we launched Serve, it was Serve American Express. But we realized when we're going to customers, it's really American Express that resonates. So, and I'd say even the same is true with Open. Open is dedicated to helping small businesses succeed, but it's backed by the power of American Express, and I think it's mutually reinforcing. But the Amex brand itself, I think, is special. It's unique. It's well known, and we're in the process of reinventing it.
So, what's the Amex brand right now? Like, what do you think it is, and what do you want this room to walk away with? What do you want the public to think of when they see American Express advertising or pull out their card?
Well, it's service, it's trust, it's integrity at its core. That American Express is a company that you can count on. That's what we care deeply about, and that we try to live up to. We're not perfect, but we want people to know that we care about taking care of our customers, and that when you work with American Express, we care deeply about integrity. But I think it goes off in lots of other tangents. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is ensure that we stay relevant, that the brand is relevant. There's so much changing in the world, whether it's the macroeconomic situation, this incredible revolution around digital and mobile and social and big data, and a completely moving field when it comes to regulations, whether it's here in the US or around the world. Every part around us is moving. And how do you keep a 163-year-old company relevant is a great challenge.
And so how do you do that?
It's a great challenge. Well, I think, you have to reinvent. And I have to say American Express, it's hard because it's really the only company I've worked for. But I've seen, I've called on many other companies around the world, partnered with many. And I have to say, we constantly are thinking about reinvention. And you have to, and I think you have to have that mindset of learning and developing, whether you're an individual, a leader, or a company. How do you stay relevant and you focus on the customer? And how do you meet the needs of the customer? And where is the puck going? I'm not a big hockey fan, but I do think, where is it going? And how do we know that we're learning as we go forward, right? That we're trying different things to stay relevant, to always add value to people who are customers of American Express.
For the non-NHL fans, that's a Wayne Gretzky reference to
It is.
I skate
Very
to
good.
Where the puck is going. Okay, there we go. We cleared that
They
up.
asked him, how did you score so many goals? I go to where the puck is going.
I go to where the puck is going. Okay, so I'm interested in this. About a year and a half ago, I interviewed the CEO of the Container Store, a guy named Kip Tyndall. Interesting guy, Texas. And we're walking through this huge store, really customer driven, right? And I said to him, well, you're a newly public company. How are you dealing with the shareholders? And he says, I feel like I'm an outlier in corporate America. And I said, why is that? And he goes, well, because I think that we have three constituencies. We have shareholders, we have our customers, and we have our employees. Those are our three. And he said, and I rank them without even breathing or looking. It's my employees come first, my customers come second, and my shareholders come last. And I don't have any issue with that. That's the way it is. I have always asked every person who is a high-level C-suite person that same question. I've never heard that response. So let me ask you, at American Express, how do you rank your three constituencies?
Well, that's pretty cool. But I'd say we focus on that customer value chain. We care deeply about our shareholders, and we are held to high standards about delivering financial returns and being a growth company. But we're convinced the only way you get there are to have loyal customers. Customers who are not just satisfied, but who would refer you to a friend. So we obsess over net promoter scores, which you may know. That's kind of a higher bar that we set for customer satisfaction. And when you're a service company, the only way you get customers to refer you to a friend is when you have deep employee engagement, right? That employees feel like they're working for a firm that challenges them to be better, that helps them be better. They work for someone who cares about them, who develops them. The answer to your question, it's a balanced scorecard. You can't succeed in one without the other. And they're all connected. And we have goals across all three categories. And I think it's has served us well because we're not obsessing over this quarter's performance. We very much understand what this quarter's performance are, and we manage, but we're caring about adding value and doing it the right way through employees taking care of customers. If you do that well, the shareholder results take care of themselves.
Well, you've been in the business a long time. Do you feel like the shift towards the shareholder, the tilt in sort of like the Jack Welchian view that, you know, the only thing I'm supposed to deliver is shareholder value, has that thrown companies off balance? Maybe not your own, but has that kind of shifted the measurement in corporate America?
Well, if I hear a competitor talking like that, I usually feel good, which means that they're not focused on the right thing. How do you create long-term value? I think there is, you know, it's part of the American economy is to focus on this quarter's results, and this quarter's results do count. But if you're not focused on long-term value, if you don't have a balanced scorecard, and you're a competitor of American Express, there's some likelihood we're going to beat you.
Oh, I like that. He's competitive, you see. So let's talk a little bit about some of the developments that have gone on within the company. Let's talk about, you know, obviously you've got a great tenure, but let's talk about since the financial crisis, because obviously a lot of things changed. You became a bank holding company. You're now regulated by the wonderful folks over at the Federal Reserve.
We are.
Are there any regulators in the house? We'll just keep saying nice things.
And regulators are real people too.
That's right. And
they are.
So how has that changed what you guys do day to day, and how has that changed your vision about growth, and where do you sit today, you know, 4 years after the bottom?
It's a great question, and it's been a journey, and it's one we never thought we'd be on. But when I look back, particularly the last 10, 15 years, going through so many different cycles, coming, you know, with the horrible events of 9/11 to the wars, then the Great Recession, and how you go through these cycles and how you learn and try to reinvent and come out of them. And I can remember, you know, that cycle. If you look at that recession, you can break. I think of it in two halves. There was the post-Lehman crash, which was about the liquidity going away and the markets, you know, near meltdown. And that's when we became a bank holding company, because it wasn't clear, you know, that if you weren't a bank and you were a financial company that you could survive, because all our financing had dried up. But before Lehman, it was the recession that was triggered by the real estate bubble bursting. And that real estate bubble burst in 2007, where you know, home values started dropping, interest rates, mortgage rates were being priced up, lots of creative mortgages. But the first impact of the real estate bubble bursting was really on affluent people who had a lot of debt, right, who had multiple mortgages. The highest FICO score you could have, the highest credit rating in this country, is if you had 2 or 3 mortgages and you were current. No one looked at the debt or the type of mortgage you had. And that happened to be, you know, a fair share of American Express customers. So we started going through the impact of the recession early in 2007. Came out in 2009, was like having a massive hangover, lots of cobwebs, became a bank holding company, and we were debating, you know, do we have the right assets, the right business to get back to record earnings again? And after we did a lot of soul searching, we realized we did, but we had to change a number of things. And all our competitors, most companies in the world during that period were playing defense, trying to figure out how to survive this Great Recession. But not every company was playing defense. And I remember at the end of 2009, looking back, or early 2010, and it was clear the world had changed, and we hadn't noticed. And we being a lot of us. You know, at the beginning of that, in 2007, Apple didn't have a phone. And Facebook had 100,000 people, mostly in 20 colleges around the country. And that had changed drastically. So not everyone was playing defense. The world was changing. And that was kind of a wake-up call for us. So yeah, we had to deal with this whole regulatory situation where the bar was being changed by regulators every week as to what's acceptable, and new laws are being written, because there were definitely players in financial services and credit cards that had abused consumer practices. There was clearly a lot of that out there. But if all we did was worry about that, we would be in a very different position now. We started then realizing we have to deal with that environment, but the most important thing was customer behavior was changing. And it was changing because you're walking around with the internet in your pocket and billions of apps being downloaded that are changing customer behavior. And how do we stay relevant with all that change going on, but also be able to meet the needs of regulators and make sure we understood what was changing and what we had to change on both fronts. So it wasn't, we were learning how to be a regulated bank holding company, and we were learning how to reinvent ourselves and understand the threats of what was happening with digital and mobile, but what opportunities were being created.
So give us a couple of examples of things that really did change as you woke up out of your drunken stupor.
I said it was like a hangover.
I understand. I made it on the Daily Show using that same metaphor, so be careful.
Well, on the digital front, I remember we were on a journey. I was on a journey, right, that I was being challenged personally. And you've been in the company a long time. Are you part of the future or are you part of the past? No one really says that to you, but if you read the tea leaves, that was a theme. But I started remembering the late 90s, believe it or not. I was working at American Express during that Web 1.0 experience, and I remembered what we were doing and how we reinvented ourselves, and we invested in companies and spun companies off and created companies, most of which none of worked at the time. But we had a whole spirit of entrepreneurialism alive in American Express. So I wanted to create that spark again, only this time it felt real, that there was really an infrastructure, and mobile phones particularly, that were going to change the world. So we were on a journey. I was on a journey looking, getting plugged in again, came back from London, getting plugged into Silicon Valley, finding out what's going on in New York. You surround yourself with advisors, and I was looking for what that spark would be without knowing what it was. And at the end of, I think it was 2010, I remember at the end of October of 2010, being in a meeting with the people who work in Open, in small business services, who pitched me a 5-minute idea that, most of the economy was improving in the US at the time, rebounding nicely, but small businesses weren't. And we stand for helping small businesses. Let's create a day after Black Friday, before Cyber Monday, called Small Business Saturday. And that would get American shopping small, and Amex would create a movement. And we had 3 weeks to go. They had a tiny budget, a great idea. It was like a light shining down, saying, this is what I've been looking for. But the way we're going to create a movement wasn't going to be by showing a lot of commercials and print advertising. We had 3 weeks to go, and we did it on Facebook. And we pushed everything on Facebook. And within 3 weeks, we had over 1 million likes. We had 40% of the country became aware of that. We spurred that with marketing to card members, gave offers to card members to shop small. And I realized now we were creating a small team that worked across the company, that was leveraging social, that was empowered. My role changed from reviewing and holding people accountable to a scorecard to getting people out of their way, giving them air cover. They only had 3 weeks. I said, how much trouble could they get in? And amazing things happened. And out of that Small Business Saturday, I wanted that same approach with very similar people who were part of that team to go and focus on a couple of digital areas. I was very interested in doing something with iTunes, which we did, but then that led to Foursquare. Foursquare led to Facebook, and Facebook led to Twitter. Twitter led to Xbox, then tweeting to buy, then launching a pass on Apple in 3 weeks. And we had created this stream of work that was like throwing a pebble in an ocean and watching the ripple impact, that we were now launching products in 3 or 4 weeks that normally would have taken 6 or 9 months. We were breaking all the rules, but creating unique value for card members and merchants who accept the card. And every partner we work with, we made them better, right, by working with us. So it was amazing to watch, again, this reinvention, and it wasn't a straight line, and I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I knew I found some really cool people at American Express who were not worried about what their next promotion was. They're worried about making an impact and changing the world.
So in this structure, is there one big digital team? Like a lot of people who are sitting here, they work in organizations that have fragmented teams. So do you guys have one team that creates it, or is it per business?
No, it's a great question. So what I try to do is give each business room to kind of reinvent themselves. This team I'm talking about, though, I took directly, working for me, because they cut across the different businesses. They're not, you organize by business because it creates structure and focus, and you care about the customers of that business. But sometimes when you just look at it from a business point of view, if you work for American Express, you're not optimizing for the whole company. Because we care about card members and merchants. We're a big US business, but we operate in 120 countries. So I wanted a group that had the freedom to cut across my organization. So we have both. We have teams in each business, and we have a group of people that work on some of these projects that cut across the whole company. And they're disruptive.
Right. I was just going to say, so does it bug some of the tradition? Who are some of the disruptors out there?
I see one right there.
We see them right here. So
and there's another one right
How
over
do
here.
you manage that with some of the people who are resistant? I mean, there's a lot of people who come from mature companies that are scared of this.
Yeah.
And I know that, and in fact, I think that most people, even if they're scared of it, they understand the opportunity, but that fear is pretty big. So how did you get over that?
Well, one, I think that's a very relevant question, and I still think that there are people who have worked their way up in their careers who never operated this way, and this way of operating is threatening. But also in American Express, it is a very collegial company, and a number of us have been there a long time, and we do trust each other. So I do think it is disruptive, but it's not terrible, and I think. There is something about how if I waited for the normal process to bubble up, to come up through a business unit to get to me, I'd still be waiting, 3 years later, because it would never get here, because people are going to use the wrong metric. So I had to flatten the organization, change the scorecard rules, let them go, and then make sure along the way that, like my direct reports, were learning as well, to keep an open mind. And that led me to, when I think about all the stuff, it was never about be digital, right? Because digital is not the end game. Social is not the end game. The end game for us is growth, to be a growth company when you have all this change going around. And digital is just a way to enable growth. And you have to have an open mind, and you have to learn. And so I focus not so much on digital, I focus on growth, and I focus on this concept of a growth mindset. A growth mindset is epitomized by every day I can learn something, even if I've been here 33 years. I don't know it all. The second I think I know it all is the second I become obsolete. So, jump in, embrace change, learn, celebrate learning. So I don't celebrate failure. I'm not a big fan of failure, but I define failure as you try something, it doesn't work, and you give up. If you try something, it doesn't work, you learn, and you maybe go in a different direction, you pivot, you pick up information you didn't have before. That's where it's celebrating. Accepting mediocrity is a failure. Challenging the status quo, as long as you have the interests of customers in mind, is a home run.
So when you're talking about even some of these digital campaigns, what is the metric by which you're measuring success? I mean, everybody now knows about Small Business Saturday. That's great, but how about other, maybe more of a day-to-day that there's tweeting going on and offers and communication. So how are you measuring success with that?
No, it's cool, because even Small Business Saturday, I had to, keep the sharks away, right? So, does it matter that 40% of Americans knew in the first year? Could I track it to the P&L? No, I couldn't. By the third year, last one, we had 75% of Americans became aware of it, and we did research that showed Americans spent $5 billion at small businesses that day. That's a pretty good metric, but it's not American Express's P&L. Right? It's not. That's a net cost for us to create that environment, but we redefined our brand. So how do you measure a brand investment? You can't treat every investment this way, but I know it when I see it. With these digital ones, the first was, there was no scorecard. I had no idea how many people would sync their card with Foursquare to check in and get a couponless offer from American Express. I had no idea, how many people would sync with Facebook, or how many would tweet to buy what we were selling on Twitter. But what I did care about was Net Promoter Score. Were we engaging customers in a different way? Did we surprise and delight customers? Did we change the conversations with merchants who accept the card? So historically, our conversations with merchants, particularly large ones, would go something like, you're part of my supply chain, my goal is for you to reduce your cost, lower the price of accepting American Express. Now, many of these same merchants are coming to us and say, can we do marketing with you on Twitter? We're not meeting with the CFO, and we love CFOs. We're meeting with software engineers, right, in Cupertino and in Mountain View, right, and in Bangalore. And we're in the conversations now of creating products together. Yeah, they still care about their supply chain, and we're on their supply chain, but it's now we've changed the conversation. That's a net I look at that as a net promoter score of merchants, and I care about merchants as much as I care about card members. And eventually this is going to lead to more spending on the network, and eventually we're going to be more relevant to people who think Amex is cool but not relevant for them. We'll acquire more customers. So I know where it's going, but I don't want to put too tight a rein on it now. I want to just make sure we're staying relevant and surprising and delighting our customers.
I think that some of the people who are here today are probably thinking, oh, I wish I had a boss like him. This is awesome.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll tell you the truth, too.
So let's say that there is, how can some of these people go back to their companies and take some of these messages and talk to the boss in a way that, look, hey, it is not going to hit our P&L immediately.
Yeah.
What's the message that they need to bring back?
I mean, it's not an easy conversation to have. It's not, for me, it's president of the company, not an easy conversation to have with other people, because there's an art and a science. And you're running a big company, and there is a science of scorecards and metrics and return on investment and investment optimization and prioritization, and there's the tech queue, and there's the whole process of how we run the company so it's not anarchy. But then you have to know the art of it is when those rules don't apply. And I think the more you apply a scorecard to innovation and something that's new, the more you eliminate imagination. Right? You have to find places to keep imagination alive. The what if we did this, what would happen? Well, let's find out. And I think I mean, that's why I don't know what the answer is, but I know it starts with you have to have people who care about reinventing the company, who are a little paranoid about what's coming around the corner and how you do stay relevant. You have to realize that the world has changed, and having whatever it is, 50 billion apps floating around there is going to change consumer behavior. You know, you have to have that growth mindset, because I think, and I know it's out there, I see it in many other places, but I also see big companies can cut off imagination. And quite honestly, I don't mind that if that's a competitor of ours.
Right.
I don't get too upset by that.
Well, let's get into some of the culture, talent conversation. I think there's some people who are HR professionals here.
Yeah.
And it's really astounding that in this massive company, how do you create a culture where employees are feeling empowered and heard and encouraged? And, you know, what is it that is the pixie dust that you're sprinkling out there?
I mean, it's hard work, and it's when it starts with, so we've had the same CEO, Ken Chenault, since 2000, right? So he's been there 13 years, and he, like I, grew up in the company, though I have him by 1 year.
Nice.
I have him by 1 year. And I'd say, you know, there is a culture that from the very beginning, long before we knew about digital or social or local, we cared about leadership, and we had that balance. We've had this balanced scorecard of employees, customers and shareholders for 20 plus years. I can't remember not having it. So we've always cared deeply about leadership. And I think we've been blessed to have people, leaders, who walk the talk. And that's hard, right? So I think leadership counts. And I also think you have to believe that, again, in that balanced scorecard, that you have to have not just satisfied employees, but fully engaged employees. And are you creating an environment that are helping people reach their full potential, if you can ever figure out what that means? But when we've dissected that a couple of times, first we know people leave, they come to join a company, but they leave their boss. They quit because they don't like their boss, generally speaking. Right? So we spend a lot of time worrying about leaders. And you want to create a culture, when we're not perfect at it, where the leader's job is to make the people who work for them successful, and you hold leaders accountable to that, right? And it's not a perfect science, but that's a priority. And then we've learned a lot over the years. I know personally for me, it's been an incredible journey learning about diversity and inclusion. Because if you want a diverse customer base, you have to have a diverse workforce. And not just diverse, it has to be one where people feel they're included and they can have a voice. And if I keep saying it doesn't matter. Yeah, I understand I'm a white male, right?
You are?
But I also
coming out as a white male. Everyone get this?
I admit, a 50-something-year-old white male know that. But I also know I can say I started as a temp, and I grew up, in an immigrant family where my father never got beyond 5th grade, and that was not what American Express was hiring for when I joined the company. So I always felt like I was an underdog and can understand that there's not always a level playing field. And I felt that when I was a temp, and I've seen it throughout my career. And that's a good cause for me to take on. How do you create a level playing field? You know there are people out there that feel excluded. So how do you reach out to people, right? And we've done a lot with gender intelligence. And I did learn, when you do gender intelligence, you really find out what I kind of knew intuitively, having 2 daughters, right? That the female mind is far more complex than the male
more
mind.
interesting.
And more. And you're using both sides of your brain, and the pistons are firing back and forth. But I did feel liberated when in this gender intelligence training, it was just that people, men and women, think differently. That occasionally a man can think of nothing. So when you ask me what I'm thinking about, and I say nothing, it's actually possible to be thinking of nothing. So that's liberating. But we spent a lot of time thinking about gender intelligence. We spend a lot of time thinking about the difference between mentors and sponsors. So a mentor is there to help. A sponsor is there to put their neck on the line to help you get promoted when that decision is being made. So we've tried to build this culture of leadership, of training people to think differently, to realize people think differently. The difference of if you've succeeded in your career, it's your time to pay it back by being a sponsor. And don't just sponsor people who look like you or people you're comfortable with. Reach out. And we're not perfect, but I do think when you look at American Express, you will see diversity. You'll see a lot more women in senior management. Still got a long way to go, right? You'll see a diverse workforce, and more importantly, hopefully you see one where you can be an assistant manager or the president of the company, and you can have a voice on what we're doing, and you have that. And I keep telling, just don't accept mediocrity, and if you're going to push for change, just make sure you got your eye on the prize, which is taking care of a customer. And as long as you treat people like they want to be treated, you can do anything you want in this company. But you got to walk the talk.
So do you have former mentorship programs, and how does that work, or is it more of just sort of a casual thing?
It goes, it's gone back and forth. We have formal mentor programs. The best ones seem to be self-selecting, and leaders have to be open to it. But we've done a lot more work with sponsors now, right? That sponsoring people. So the other thing I've learned that I think makes sense is when we've looked, why are there not enough women in senior management? There is research to suggest that men get promoted based on potential. Women get promoted based on results. And that's a big difference, right? So how do men get promoted? And you realize that more men have sponsors where someone else is sticking their neck out for them, and it's generally a man. And it's because they're more comfortable, or there's a whole psychology here. But we look at now, so how do you disrupt that? So how do we disrupt the fact that Google could come into payments? We push ahead with what we're doing on social. How do we disrupt that men tend to promote other men? We disrupt that by creating sponsors and holding people to be accountable to be sponsors of a diverse set of people, ones you're not necessarily comfortable with, though you better learn about. You still get promoted based on merit, but it has to be more than that, because there's not always a level playing field. So we've learned a lot about this over the years.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. And when you're looking at some of these functions that sort of feel like middle or back office, they're not front end revenue.
Yeah.
Do you have to sell that idea harder internally?
Which I do.
To the idea of saying, I'm going to spend money on HR leadership, I'm going to spend money on branding. Like these are, it almost feels like it's not direct impact on the P&L. Is there pushback from your cohorts, or is it okay because they trust you?
No, it's funny. I think everyone, you have businesses completely focused on their P&Ls and making their business healthy. But the culture permeates where we know this is critical. So I don't get pushback on training like that. I think we all have a lot to learn, some more than others. And you just make sure as leadership, you're holding people accountable for development. But this whole thing, about where I thought you were going with that was, it's easy to bring a growth mindset to the cool stuff we're doing. Like I was mentioning, all the digital innovation we have, and that continues. But we also have to bring growth mindset to whether it could be a back office function, or it could be compliance. And American Express did have some compliance issues that we're dealing with. And I could explain to you, we have a great company, care deeply about customer satisfaction. We have the highest customer sat scores of credit cards in the US and in most countries around the world. Won the J.D. Power Award 6 years in a row ever since they gave it out to credit cards in the US. But we have problems. And our problems are that we're not always end-to-end excellent in what we do. So we're a marketing company that became a bank holding company. We tried many different things, and we knew that if we tried a product or a service and it wasn't perfect and there was a problem, you had the best service organization in the industry to call who would take care of your problems. And when card members call our service organization and the experience they get, 9 out of 10 times their satisfaction is higher. That's a good model, but it's insufficient in the regulatory world we're in. So we have to focus more on end-to-end process excellence. And we got called out by a couple of regulators last year for having problems. So what do you do? It's like one thing, like I said, how do you deal with that issue and innovation at the same time? And it dawned on me, as I went through this own process of reflecting and thinking about what the regulators were saying, and there's many of them, right? And sometimes the regulators disagree with each other, and it's complex. But at the core of it, they weren't asking us to do anything that wasn't in the best interest of customers, right? They were asking us to be transparent and fair. And there are different definitions of transparent and fair, and that's the hard part. But at the core, they're asking us to be a better company. And once I realized that and I could embrace it, then I could celebrate the people working on compliance as much as I could the people working on tweet to buy. Because they're both, one can't exist without the other. Right. And we can't succeed as a company unless we're fully compliant and we get process excellence and innovate. And that was a massive learning to me about growth mindset. Is not just on the cool new stuff, it has to be on the hard stuff too.
Right, the nuts and bolts of your business every day. And so now that you're fully embraced, you're sunk into the digital age. By the way, he did follow me on Twitter.
I did.
Which is kind of nice.
8,000 plus followers. I'm impressed.
Maybe 9 by the end of today, hopefully. So how do you see this brand of American Express? How is it existing on social? Here we are in a great social environment. LinkedIn's is a great company. How is it that American Express can sort of maintain its identity that has this great service organization and be relevant and all at the same time make money? Like, it seems really daunting.
It is, and I don't know if there's one answer to that. But I do know the world is changing, and I do know LinkedIn is doing a great job, and we're doing a lot of stuff with LinkedIn, and I think it's a very powerful network, and I think it's symbolic of what's happening, of people sharing and connecting in ways 10 years ago didn't exist, 5 years ago didn't exist. And I think we had to realize the brand is not something we can control anymore. We can nourish it and push it in the right direction, but it's open, it's out there. And people can tweet about it, they can share it, they can like it, they can not like it, right? They can Instagram it, they can do whatever they want to it. It belongs to our customers and to other people who have an opinion. And we can't fight that trend. We have to embrace it. And that's still an ongoing discussion in American Express, because not everyone gets the fact of the social world we're living in now. And if all your lens is 50 plus customers, you don't see that world. So it's interesting. It's interesting to have this conversation, even with our board of directors, about how this is changing. And you might not see it yet in our P&L, and maybe it's just early adopters, but we're worried about 3-5 years from now, 10 years from now, if we don't embrace this, we'll be irrelevant. And I believe that to be true, and I believe we're still finding our way. But I do know the brand doesn't just belong to American Express. It's out there in the ether, and we have to nourish it and enhance it and hope when we take care of a customer and they're satisfied and they think we've just done something cool, they're going to share it and talk about it. And the more they talk about it with their friends who may not be customers, the more our own customers are telling their friends that we're relevant, and their friends may not have known that. So I believe that's the payoff to this going down the road, is that we're using social to reinvent the brand, to embrace it, and that will change the way we grow the business in the future.
That's so cool.
Right.
So how do you deal with negative comments that come in? It's one thing for someone to call up an 800 number and blast the poor person on the other end, but how do you deal with that public part of that can be a little daunting also?
It can be, but because there are problems that happen, and sometimes they're our fault, sometimes they're not. We get blamed for it, but we got to deal with it in an authentic way. If a customer has an issue, we got to deal with it. And if they're telling us on Twitter they have a problem, we got to deal with it on Twitter and then take it private, right? So you're not getting into personal information. But it's out there. The really cool thing about Amex, and any of you can go look at American Express and ask Amex. There's a lot of positive out there. Right, so, and that's good. We're creating a lot of value. There's a lot of really positive momentum, and occasionally there are problems that we got to fix. So if they call us, we deal with it, but if they tweet it, we got to deal with it there as well, and we try to be authentic to that platform. Mm-hmm. And you can't, it's out there, right? So the best thing is to treat that customer with respect, handle it properly, and hopefully make them into a loyal customer. So
you are a service company. Your people are very important. You've already talked about that. So talk about some of your recruiting efforts. I'm just wondering, if someone is lucky enough to get their 18th interview at American Express and sits in front of you, what is it, or maybe 19 to get to him, what is it that gets you jazzed? Like when you see somebody, what's exciting? What are some of the things that you're really looking for? And I know it's different based on the position, but it's like a general gestalt.
So I'm going to be like a broken record. I'm looking for growth mindset, and I know it when I see it. Because others will interview for technical skills. And by the time I see somebody, it's, can this person succeed in American Express? Can they adjust to our culture, and can we learn from that person? So, I care deeply about, is someone committed to self-improvement, right? Are they on a journey? Are they learning? Is life an adventure? And what are they doing for their own personal development? And what do they want their legacy to be? Whether they're starting at the company or interviewing for a president of a business unit. But I care deeply about the mindset, because that's the stuff. That's, if there is pixie dust, it's around how you approach, life and how you approach your job and how do you feel every day. Because particularly if I'm interviewing for leaders, right, I honestly believe the culture of a company is just the sum total of everybody's attitude that day. And if you're a leader and you come in and you've had a bad night and you've had an argument or something's not right and you're not feeling quite right today, everyone around you is going to feel that as well, and you're going to suck the life out of the room. If you're coming in every day positive, feeling good about your job, knowing that there are challenges, but this is a day we're going to make an impact, everyone around you is uplifted by that. And not everyone can do that every day. Trust me, I'm not like that every day. But I do care deeply about the mindset that people bring and the commitment to learning and development.
So before we open it up to questions, I would like to know, you said, how you defined failure, and I'm not going to ask you about what your failures are, but I'm going to ask you, what are some, 3 things that you really thought were going to work that did not work, where you thought, you went in and you said, this is it. I have that idea. So I want 3 examples of the things that you thought were going to be sweet, awesome deals that went south. And then I want 3 example of things that you did not think were going to be good ideas and were amazing. Because you got one which was, or you knew you had an idea. You said, okay, this is going to be a great idea, right? Small Business Saturday. But what's the thing you thought was going to be great that really was fell flat?
Well, it's funny, I don't think about those because all of those lead to something that do work, right? So there's lots of little things that we've done that didn't work, but that led to something bigger. And there's some things I'd love to give you examples about that are happening right now, but would be a little premature, and Brad would get upset with me if I started talking about it.
He's fine. Ignore him. Go ahead.
No, but honestly, it's funny because there's been many times I've been frustrated that something didn't happen faster, or that it didn't work. I can go back to last week. I can go back to 20 years ago. But all the stuff, that we're trying led to another direction. There are basics of running the credit card business in the UK that I spent years trying to figure out that just didn't work. That led us to a relationship with the Loyalty Coalition business in the UK that led us to look at that as a business, that we bought a company in Germany and we just launched a coalition business in Mexico. And only I can find that thread. That's something that I screwed up in the credit card business in the UK 5 years ago, led to us buying a company a year ago and launching it in Mexico and India, right? But one thing leads to another. And I always say it's like, I remember, I think it was Steve Jobs' commencement address at Stanford years ago. It was like an 8-minute speech that to me resonated, that said stuff happens when you're going through, and you never see the connection until you look back, and then you can see how all the dots connected that led to something bigger. And I'm a bigger believer in that. So rarely do I go back and question failure, because if it's leading to something else, it's a learning. So I'm not answering your question.
No, you're not. I'm so
avoiding
dissatisfied.
it like the plague.
I really wanted something good.
I don't know if it's good. But I was having this conversation the other day with someone from Silicon Valley yesterday morning, and they were asking me similar questions, and that person had been around for Web 1.0 as well, and I was telling him that I was involved in launching the first internet product at American Express in 1996, which was a corporate travel booking tool that we knew people were going to stop calling on the phone to book business travel. We wanted to build an online tool. At the time, we reached out to the then 800-pound gorilla, Microsoft, called on Microsoft. They were building a CD-ROM of travel. And that was their online travel business, was a CD-ROM that had hotel content on
Awesome.
it. They were going through their own transformation, saying, wow, the internet is about to take off. And there's all stories about that, and it's true. I was right there when Nathan Myhrvold sent out a memo and said the world is changing. And Microsoft now and us got together to build the first corporate travel booking tool, which is complicated. It's not just online, but you have to put in negotiated fares for companies. You have to have all the rules for companies. We launched this at this huge travel event. I had Bill Gates on a video conference, made the headlines of all the papers the next day, Amex and Microsoft. 6 months later, no transactions happened. Corporate travel was slow. Microsoft got bored. They walked away from us. Oh. They decided not to get out of business travel at the time and go into consumer travel, and they created Expedia with the same code that they had built for us. And they spun Expedia out years later, and it's interesting, right? So that was a huge failure for us, right? That we got all this press and nothing happened. We built it, they did not come. But what that then did was open up a whole other world for us of doing it on our own and trying to create not just rely on a partner at that time, Microsoft, but how do we build those skills in-house? And I can now go back and say that led to us really reinventing our whole technology group, right? Because we said we have to be able to do things ourselves. We can't just rely on partners. So I mean, every year there's at least one major thing that didn't go as planned, and from that, other things happen. If you look for it, right?
Right. And so you see, you answered the question. It wasn't so hard.
I didn't give you 3 and 3.
All right. I like threes. What can I say? All right. So we're going to open it up to questions, and I want to, first of all, thank you so much, because this has been so great and so open, and he's awesome. And I think that what's really kind of inspiring is for those of us who are in financial services or cover financial services, is to meet someone who's a leader who really does seem to be bringing together the old, the new. I think it's pretty awesome. I think I would be a little bit worried if there was a 28-year-old sitting in this chair talking to me about how American Express is moving forward. So I like the idea that, because these are mature companies also, and I think that that's a really important concept, and it's great to see somebody who's definitely in the growth mind, and I love the idea that you like to make people better. I think that maybe here's a note, if you get into the interview with Ed, talk about your personal therapeutic process and your journey. That's the way to get the job. So let's get some questions before we finish up here for the big man.
Hi, Paul Regan from Scotiabank. You have a great product called Link Like Love, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about it, because I actually see, we talked a lot about getting our sales force into social media. We haven't ever really talked about socially augmented products, financial products, which is really what this is. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Cool, thank you. That's one of the things we did, I think almost 2 years ago now, with Facebook. And it started, that was a product of us looking at what we had, and we have our own ecosystem, right? We have relationship with card members and merchants. We have a closed loop, and we built some unique technologies, and we created APIs to say, well, here's what, the backdrop to that story was in the late 90s, we, like everyone else, realized the web was going to be big, and we wanted to make AmericanExpress.com the be-all and end-all site, that you come here instead of Yahoo and we have everything you need. That's the wrong strategy. That didn't work. What people come to AmericanExpress.com to pay their bill and to get their membership reward points. We learned that. So when we came to this phase, we realized instead of trying to get customers to come to us, let's go where they are, right? And so where were customers? Where are they? They're on LinkedIn, they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter. What can we do to bring our value to them on their social journey? And it actually started with Foursquare, which then was a small company in a loft over NYU. When you checked in, you could get an offer from American Express, link it to your card, swipe your card. If you spend $20, get $5 back, get a statement credit, and an instant message back on your phone. That was, to us, bringing our closed loop to life on Foursquare. We then went to Facebook and said, we want to give you offers. So we call it Link Like Love, now it's Sync with Facebook, where based on your social graph, we would serve you up relevant offers. Just tap it, it's loaded to your card, and it's a spend offer. It's not buying a coupon up front. It's not having to show your phone at the cash register. It's loading it digitally to your card. When you swipe your card, we have our algorithms kick in either to approve that charge, to bill it to you, to see if you have an offer, if you met the requirements, give you the statement credit, and send you an instant message. We do that all through APIs. And we brought that to life on Facebook. And we did the same thing on Twitter, where you could turn a tweet into a transaction by just putting hashtag Amex Best Buy, and you're loading an offer. And then we brought it to Twitter to buy stuff, to get actually into commerce. But all of those are examples of going where the customer is, bringing to life what's unique about American Express, merchant content, but delivering it to you in some relevant way, and doing it authentic to the platform you're on. So Foursquare was about checking in, Facebook was about what you like, Twitter is about your interests. And so that was part of this revolution I'm talking about, but it started with this mindset, bring what's unique about American Express to life, go where the customer is, be authentic to that platform, and do something the competition can't copy. Mm. We launched that thing with Foursquare 2.5 years ago. They still haven't figured us out, right? And now, by the time they figure that out, we'll be on to the next thing. Is we have unique business model, we have great technology, and we have incredible people making that happen. And what was cool about that one, there was one where I remember the night we launched it, I was out in California, in Palo Alto, with the team from Facebook, and one of their top people told me, Ed, Amex is moving not just faster than other big companies, you were moving faster than we could keep up. And that's when I knew the hangover from the recession was over.
All right.
Right.
Back.
Hi, Elizabeth Chu from BlackRock. This whole time you've been talking about keeping the customer really at the forefront of your mind. So what are the ongoing processes that you use in order to stay plugged into what those customer interests are?
It's really interesting because we have a lot of research on what our customers value, and we're constantly testing and iterating value propositions. They like this, they don't like that, this costs money, let's take that. If they don't like it, put it over here where they do value it. So we have massive research and we do iterative testing. But there's also a gut instinct. The stuff I'm talking, if we would have asked our customers, do you want to get You want to sync your card with Facebook to get content delivered to you based on what you like. I'm not sure what the answer would be, but we knew that that was pointing us in the right direction. And we knew that we would learn from that one way or another. So sometimes research is not enough because research is backward looking. It's critical, but you have to think also about what do you want to learn, and that customers may not tell you now. They may not even know. But they know if they do it, they like it, and their net promoter score goes up, which is what happened with Facebook and Twitter and Foursquare. So it's having room to imagine it, and if it doesn't work, then iterate it, and the next time you do it better. So it's I like that. I like the kind of the yin and yang of that, right? To make sure we understand completely how customers feel about our current products, but have enough room to learn about where the puck is going.
In the front. Always like the person who sits in the front row. A student, obviously.
I waited. I'm curious as to why you wanted to become a bank holding company with all the compliance and regulations when you were so successful as a marketing company.
Yes. Well, stuff happens.
Well, we couldn't borrow money to finance our operations, and then we figured, why not?
Well, let's go. It feels like a lifetime ago, at least for me, but it wasn't that long ago, right? Whenever it was, that middle of September, Lehman goes under. And American Express holding company was not a bank holding company. We were not regulated by the Fed. We had banks as legal entities, so we always had banking because we're in the credit card business, but the holding company wasn't. And go back to those days of Secretary Paulson running the Treasury and watching the markets collapse and our source of funding starting to run out and having less than 30 days of cash on hand and all the markets where we raise money being closed. And it was clear the Fed was stepping in to help big banks. Love it or hate it, it was clear then that the Fed and the Treasury were not going to let big banks fail because they knew that would have made the problem 10 times worse. They did a lot of stuff. Some stuff worked, some stuff didn't, but they moved quickly. Over the course of a weekend, the CEO of Amex knew Paulson very well from his days at Goldman. And Paulson made it clear that they're stepping in to help banks, and we're not a bank. So we're the square peg in a round hole or a round peg in a square hole. And we had to make a decision quickly because it looked like the financial markets were headed for extinction. And I still remember Ken telling me he's not going to be the last CEO of American Express, right? So you had to make decisions.
And you weren't alone, obviously. GE had to, you had to, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. There were a lot of companies that were not banks that really needed access to the discount window.
Thank you. And that's what saved us, having access to the discount window. Not TARP, not anything else, was having the Fed backstop you that if you couldn't get money somewhere else, you could get it from them. And we never had to go to that window. Once we became a bank holding company and it was clear that the markets weren't going to collapse, it got back to BAU pretty quickly. Not from a perception of Americans about the banking system, but from an operation of the financial markets. But when we were sitting there, we had 24 hours to decide, and I'd say the boss made the right decision.
Could you go back and could you decide not to be, or did they say you are systemically important and then you are one? In other words, how does that work?
It's complicated. But I'd start with, we have banks as legal entities, so we have, we have regulators that were around the company, whether we were a bank holding company or not. And you have the Consumer Protection Bureau, which, whether we're a bank or not, is involved. When you become a bank holding company, that means the parent company is regulated by the Fed, and we're regulated by the New York Fed. And it's now how we run the company. So it's not like we're going back and saying, I wish we didn't do that. We're saying, how do we run the company effectively? There's no looking back. It's all about looking forward. And it's about the regulators looking at us, understanding our business, and us understanding what the rules are that we have to operate under. But I firmly believe, so one of the questions our board has, and we talk about openly with regulators, is that we compete with lots of different players. We compete with other credit card players in the US and around the world. So banks like Chase and Bank of America and Citi, and they're all regulated by the Fed and the same ones we have. We also compete with Visa and MasterCard, and they're not regulated by the Fed. But we're competing with CardSpring in Silicon Valley. We have Google circling payments. You have Apple with 500 million credit cards on file that trying to figure out what they're going to do. You have lots of players in payments, right, that are not regulated. But I firmly believe, again, if I go back to my growth mindset, and regulators are only asking us to do what's right for customers, once we understand their definitions and get on the same page, we're going to be better as a result. Our customers will be better. And even though if Google launches a wallet and they're not regulated, we're going to use the fact that we have end-to-end process excellence and care about customers. We're going to use that to compete with them or whoever's in our space. That took a while to figure that out, I have to admit. And it comes with, a very high bar and a burden. But I do believe it will make the company better. And I can see differences now. It's a learning curve, but I do believe it will make us better and more competitive. And what you didn't see is anyone from American Express going down to Washington to complain about regulators. We decided that's not us. There are other poster childs for complaining about regulation. We don't complain, we embrace it, and we try to make it better.
Wow, that's great. Last question, what position did you play in soccer?
Well, I always dreamed of being a center midfielder, but and I've trained both my sons to be center midfielders, but they dragged me back to defense So
this tells you something, and I know that it will not be shocking.
And no one ever got past me.
I'm sure not. And I know that it will not surprise you to learn that I started as a right wing, but then when I got tall, I put straight in the middle that good old striker, right up there in front of the goalie.
Perfect.
A little aggressive. Thank you all very much, and thanks to Ed Gilligan.
Thank you.
That was great.